And gentlemen, good evening. Are you not excited for this day? I'm excited, and that's why my wife insisted I wear this bow tie today. This is not my normal look. Normally, I'm in a like that. Yeah. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this exciting and once in a lifetime opportunity, because this is the first time that we're going to have the Clinical Research Society of Kenya. It's a privilege to have you all here, and that means that the society means a lot to each one of us and also to our ecosystem, to our patients, to all our stakeholders. So, karibu sana, and I hope you'll have, you're going to get a lot from an exciting evening full of good speeches, and we'll have an interesting panel discussion. Please feel welcome and be part of this once in a lifetime opportunity. Okay, so without much ado, we have put on the screen the agenda for today. It's not that lengthy, so we'll have Chris taking us through the journey, where we have come from, where we are, how we arrived where we are, and where we are going to. And then we'll have a very insightful panel discussion. And finally, we'll have a word from our sponsor, Oximio, and then we'll network, we'll have good meal, and then we'll have a good evening. So thank you so much. I'll hand over to Chris to bring us to speed how we got where we are.
Yes, please. Oh, I even went to the future. Sorry, computer is very slow. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as Auxilia gets us to the next slide, my name is Christopher Obwanga, and it's really exciting and a privilege to be standing in front of you this evening. And the reason why I call it a privilege is that in the last 2 years, a lot of people have worked extremely hard in the background in setting up the Clinical Research Society of Kenya. So essentially getting us to the foundations of having the Clinical Trial Society ready to take off and hopefully guide the future of the clinical work we do, not clinical, but clinical research work we do in Kenya. So before I go further, I'd like to share with you how we arrived to this day and at this exact moment. And 3 years ago, Auxilia, who seated here, joined my team as an intern. And when Auxilia joined, she kept asking, Chris, why don't we have a clinical research society in Kenya? What happened? And she kept insisting about this. I thought it was a topic she was going to drop at some point, but she didn't really. And it got me excited. And at the same time, I dreaded the next question, which was going to come from her, which was going to be, can we do this? So, of course, I sent Auxilia on an errand. I asked, are you willing to carry the weight of getting things together? I thought that would deter her, but guys, we're here. And it's all because of Auxilia, who got us started in setting up the society. So thank you for that round of applause. And over the last 2 years, we have many volunteers in the room, and I'll ask them to stand up at some point just to acknowledge the work that they've been doing. But at the conversations we've been having over the last 2 years really inspired us to think that the need to set up a society in Kenya is critical to continue accelerating the growth of clinical research in the country. And just from a show of hands in the room, or maybe someone from the crowd, out of curiosity, how much do you think Africa has contributed to clinical research in the last 20 years? What percentage do you think Africa has contributed? And not the guys who are deep in clinical research. Just out of curiosity. 0.05. And sorry, what's your name? Christina. Okay, nice to meet you. Someone else? There is. Yeah, there is. Could be. No. Someone else, maybe from that end of the room. Just a guesstimate. 5%? Okay, not too bad. 2%. Okay. So I think between 2 and 5%, it gets us to the 3% in terms of what Africa has contributed in terms of global clinical research. And the people who worked in the background, the people who worked in the background to get this society to this stage really appreciated the fact that Africa is a massive continent with about 1.4 billion people. We have huge unmet medical needs for our population, and we have a very diverse genomic profile. And at the end of the day, when we are doing little research as 3%, so 2 and 5, good, also good. The take-home message is that we're not doing enough clinical research to generate treatments and interventions that are either relevant or safe for our population. So this is the reason why most of the people in the room were motivated to work towards establishing a society for advocating for most of our Africa population and also Kenya when it comes to conducting clinical research. And when we come closer home, I know I've started with the doom and gloom, but it's not that bad. I mean, in Kenya, yes, we have participated even less in terms of global research, but the good thing is I think the foundations and the fundamentals in Kenya are in the right place to enable us to accelerate research in the country. And when we think about Kenya, we have the workforce who are highly skilled, capable of driving and driving clinical research, whether it's actually from discovery to the testing and entry into the market. So we have the workforce that has this skill set. We have sites which have really grown over the last years, and now they're capable of supporting R&D, whether it's in infectious diseases and taking up the non-communicable diseases trials that are coming into the region. And we have many people in the room here who are pioneering a shift and not they're pioneering the shift and not focusing on having Africa labeled as an infectious disease destination. So there's much more, and we have the capacity to do much more in Kenya. So I've talked about sites, I've talked about the workforce, but the third thing that's also making Kenya an ideal destination to conduct clinical research is we have a mature regulator. I know we have our challenges, but Kenya actually has a robust framework. It can always improve. But I think our regulators have done a tremendous job over the last 10 years to make Kenya a preferred destination for clinical research, and we can always continue to strengthen that. So we have the sites, we have the regulator on our corner supporting us, and then we also have the workforce that can make R&D feasible in Kenya. And then finally, as we think about clinical research in Kenya and the rest of Africa, we have to see it as an opportunity really to contribute to global R&D. We have not low baseline, that's the wrong term, but we have a good baseline to actually determine how we want Kenya to go in terms of research and development, whether we leverage technology, whether we leverage the movement where we know there's a lot of inclusive research now being in place that enables Kenya to participate in clinical research. So it's not doom and gloom, but we have an opportunity really to drive the research agenda in Kenya. So this is why the people who've been working in the background to establish a Clinical Research Society of Kenya were sold on the positives. We have challenges, but we have a good baseline to grow clinical research in the country, and hopefully regionally and Africa at the end of the day. And so the society has been established as a professional organization to just give us an opportunity to have a place for us to first collaborate, have discussions, and hopefully set an agenda that allows all you brilliant brains in here and the guys also on the live stream to be able to set the agenda to accelerate clinical research in Kenya. So Auxilia, next slide. And the initial group has come up with a mission statement for the Clinical Research Society of Kenya. And our aim here is to promote and inspire quality research through innovation and also through community and public engagement. And at the end of the day, hopefully, as professionals, as we engage with each other, we'll be able to make this a reality to make clinical research proliferate and accelerate in the Kenya. And from an objectives perspective, they're listed here. I won't read all of them, but the take-home message really is that we need to collaborate from our different facets of the clinical research landscape so that we can make sure that we continue growing clinical research in Kenya. So this is what CRSK is, and you'll have a chance to look at this in detail a bit later on. Thank you. So the progress on how we got here. So as I mentioned, Auxilia got us going, but this conversation started many years ago with many people in this room. And mostly water cooler conversations, but we knew it's a lot of heavy lifting to get the society to this stage where it is. So 2 years ago, we brainstormed, we made the decision that we're going to set up a society. Our bigger question at that point was, do we build a society that's fit for purpose for our environment, or do we subscribe to a global chapter? So we decided that we need to build something that's fit for purpose, that solves our challenges, and we're able to react faster to challenges that might be facing us in Kenya. We then had a chat with our brothers and sisters in South Africa at SACRA. We know they're an established and mature society, and they were keen to give us the audience to share their experiences, their pitfalls, their successes, and I know SACRA is in the room today here, and Gilbert will introduce them as we go along. And they were able to share with us their constitution and their strategies that they've used towards establishing a successful society. At the end of 2022, we received approvals, the legal instruments, to set up a society, and I can tell you, between Gilbert, Auxilia, and I, Gilbert, Auxilia, and I, we were pretty sure we'd have a society up and running by January 2023. And I can tell you, it's not been that easy, and we definitely started marshalling more support from people, and we have a team that's about 20 people strong that has got us to this launch opportunity. And in April, we started sensitizing a few organizations on the intention to launching the society. We tried going online just a little bit, just to let people know that it's coming. And today is the official launch of the society. And ideally, we are hoping to galvanize people to work with the society to accelerate research in Kenya. So that's our brief journey. Next slide, please. And I couldn't resist this. I had to describe what we need to do in phases. So I'll try my attempt at humor. So we have almost finished phase 1 of setting up the Clinical Research Society. And phase 1 really has entailed setting up the fundamentals. So we do have an administrative backend, a membership framework, and identified some key thematic areas that we can focus on as a society. However, we'll keep refining this. It's a conversations we all need to have. I think we still need broader stakeholder consultations so that we make sure that the areas we choose to focus on make sense for us as a country. We've been pushing a call for people to join the society. It starts, so part of the trick was to get you guys in the room. You'll be registering as you walk out. There's no option of not registering. We expect to be 60 strong by end of this evening. And we hope really in the next week or two, we'll be able actually to send out an expression of interest to make sure that we have people volunteer, people who are willing to lead, and people who believe in the cause of growing clinical research in Kenya contribute to our leadership in the future. In phase 2, which I think starts in a few days, we are keen on making sure we have a good governance structure. And we hope now with the expression of interest, we're going to get a wider representation of the people involved in the clinical research community from different areas. Because remember, clinical research doesn't take place in isolation. We have to think about the before, the during, and what happens after the clinical research. So ideally, we want an inclusive leadership team that will enable us to cover the whole trajectory of what research is supposed to achieve. Then we hope in the next few weeks also to have, not weeks, but maybe months, have an election, at least of people who have volunteered to support the leadership of the society. We also aim to fine-tune the thematic areas we think we need to focus on as a country, and inaugurate some of the working groups that will focus on areas that we need to develop. As I mentioned, we still need to continue engaging more stakeholders to make sure that when we hit the ground running, or as we continue running, we are able to have the impact we aim to achieve in the future. And then we hope in the near future that as we continue growing the society, we all want to have a good baseline understanding of what the landscape looks like in Kenya, regionally and globally. And I think that's a really important point, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the information which sits in different silos And phase 3, which I hope is a year from now, where we'll have 500 people having a gala about celebrating some of the milestones we've achieved, is ideally just to make sure that we're not working in isolation in Kenya. Of course, we're collaborating with wider people. And at the end of the day, we also hope that we have a sustainable model that will enable this society to live and be sustained beyond our time. So that's the general plan we have about the society. As I can tell you, I think I was telling Caroline, we've definitely not crossed our T's and dotted our I's. We have an idea of where we need to be going, but we need to call on all of you to join the society so then we can have a proper strategic plan and make sure that we succeed as a society. So I'll pause there with my many stories. But as we go to the next slide, that's Elia. These are the people who've been working in the background for the last 2 years to make the society a reality. We hope at the end of today, I think these are 20 individuals. I hope we will be about 80, and we'll take this journey forward in establishing the society to be successful in driving our agenda in Kenya. So thank you very much, and welcome to the journey. Sorry, Gilbert reminds me I still have to talk. And now, at this stage, I'd like to invite a group of very intelligent, driven, successful individuals who support our clinical trial industry. And I'd first like to start by introducing our moderator for the next panel, who will just be talking about, the panel will be focusing on the Kenyan ecosystem. It's really broad strokes. It's one conversation of thousands we'll probably have in the next X number of years. So we cannot be exhaustive today, but we hope that this starts us in the right foot in trying to make people understand what's happening on the continent. So for the next session, I'd like to invite Dr. Bona Nyaoke. Dr. Bona Nyaoke is a clinical researcher and a public health specialist. She's a medical doctor by profession, having graduated from a Bachelor of Medicine and a degree in public health. And Dr. Bona currently works as the head of the mycetoma program at the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, a collaborative, patients' needs-driven nonprofit research and development organization that is developing new treatments for neglected diseases. Dr. Bona has expansive experience in clinical research with previous work in epidemiological and simulated studies. So she does have extensive experience in HIV and Ebola vaccines, and it's really a privilege to invite Dr. Bona to welcome our panelists for the next session. Dr. Bona.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this next session. So I will call my panelists on stage. Some of them are a bit worried at the additional questions that I was planning on asking, but it seems to be a very cool and calm audience, and I'll try to be a bit easy on them. So we'll start with Dr. Huwaida. Dr. Huwaida Bulhan is passionate about health equity and how research can be transformative to healthcare practice and policy in Africa. Dr. Huwaida has over a decade of experience in primary healthcare and global clinical research oversight and management in private industry as well as academia. She'll give us some more information once we've sat down on what else she's doing. Then next we'll have Caroline Kithinji, who's a senior research officer at Kenya Medical Research Institute, an experienced ethicist playing a key role in building capacity for the ethics review committees locally and regionally. Lilian Mutengu is a program manager at Science for Africa, responsible for establishment, strategic planning, and execution of a continental public engagement program for the Science for Africa Foundation. And finally, but not least, definitely we need gender equity. Nick Kisengese, who's our, that's actually 1 out of 5, but we tried. Chief Executive Officer at CleanWin Research. CleanWin is a mid-sized contract research organization based in Nairobi, Kenya, with regional offices in Kampala, Uganda, and Kigali, Rwanda. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. Okay. Daktari, closest to me now. We could start by maybe providing a background on the work that you're doing in clinical trials or in clinical research.
I was the one who was worried about her extra questions. Just fiercely writing on the paper. Good evening, everyone. I'm Huwaida Bulhan. I come from the industry side, so I work for pharmaceutical industry. I work for Roche. And I lead our clinical research operations team for East, Central, and West Africa. So you wanted me to speak more about what we do. I came into this role a little bit over 4 years ago, and up until that time, I think as we've shared with statistics, was part of the problem of the minimal amount of industry clinical research that's being done on the continent of Africa. So what my team and I do is to actually facilitate, manage, and attract global clinical trials that are sponsored by Roche to be conducted in the sub-Saharan African countries, starting with Kenya. So what we've achieved in the last 4 years is at least about 20 clinical trials from phase 1 to phase 3. So that has been quite a significant change for us as an organization, but just generally in private industry. The other piece has been to bring a new focus on non-infectious clinical trials as well to the sub-Saharan African space. So we have primarily delved into oncology clinical trials, something that many people are not aware of and didn't think would be possible in some of our countries. So that's what we've been doing, quite busy, I think, over the last few years, getting those structures up and running.
Thank you. Jumping into more of our local research institutions, Caroline, just a brief on the work that you're currently doing.
Okay, I'm the Kenya National Examination Council for research. People fear me because I'm going to give them a D or an E or ungradable, but I work with the Ethics Committee. I've been working with the Ethics Committee for the last almost 20 years now, and I have reviewed quite a number of proposals. I have seen the number of clinical trials increase in our country since I started, and I have seen the relationship and the connection and the communication between people in regulation and people doing the research improve over the years. Before, it was very strained. We felt we would be contaminated by industry, so I would not sit so near her in case she warps my mind and makes me give approval where I shouldn't. But that's no longer the case. Yeah, we sit next to each other, we talk to each other, and we've realized now that that's the best way to go. The more we cooperate, I'll call it cooperating, the better it is for the research participant and the better it is for research in Kenya. So I'll just leave it at that. I think that's what we do in regulation.
Thank you. I think after industry, local research, I'll jump to our CRO representative.
Good evening. I'm Nick Kesengese. As I've been told, I'm Director Clean Research Services, which is a local CRO. So with the original offices in Nairobi, we have also other offices in Rwanda and Uganda. We started CleanWin as a local solution to managing clinical trials. We wanted to provide both our local investigators and international investigators, both pharma biotechs, an opportunity to tap to local resources in terms of also building local capacity. In fact, one of our biggest value proposition is to build capacity of local clinical research professionals. we are in business, but also we do a lot in terms of building local capacity. We have done a lot of work on neglected tropical diseases. We have done a lot of work in the vaccines and other indications. We are looking at the market, and we have seen the market grow over time. I remember in 2015, we had around about 500 or so registered clinical trials in Kenya. Now we are moving to almost 1,000. If you look at the clinical trial registry, so we have seen the growth of the industry. We have seen the growth of the number of CRAs in the market. We have trained over 100 plus CRAs across East Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Sudan, all over. We have supported a lot of sponsors. I mean, our moderator here, she comes from one of the organizations. We have supported like dozens of so many of their studies. We also try to stand out as guys we can go and perform studies in very resource-limited settings. Like, for example, I don't know, many of you maybe have been to Kacheliba or somewhere in Doka in Sudan or somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Tanzania. So those are the places we go. I mean, we also deal with very rare diseases like mycetoma. First, we are supporting a lot of work on mycetoma, leishmaniasis, pediatric HIV, so those are rare indications. So that's what we have been doing. And then moving forward into the future, we are looking at now supporting global programs. Like, of course, we are involved now in many global projects, and also still pushing hard to get as many clinical researchers interest. We are stimulating the market to understand that the new graduates, people coming from the university, people working at the state level, they can get interested in clinical research, both to go to management of clinical research and also investigators. So that's what we are looking at. Thank you.
Nick, that was introduction plus most of my questions, but that's okay. So finally, we go to the other side. We've talked to industry, our research institutions, CRO, what is usually quite important, and we tend to put it last, but should be the beginning of what we all do, public engagement. Lillian, could you tell us a bit more of your work?
Good evening, everybody. Before I get into what we do, I think I'll just give a very brief overview of Science for Africa Foundation. So I work for an organization called Science for Africa Foundation, and at the foundation we are really, our business is funding science on the continent through grant making, but we also have program implementation, and as well as supporting regional groups in agenda setting for science on the continent. So I'll stop there. Those of you who are interested in knowing more, please visit the site. My role is really I lead on public engagement, and public engagement covers different publics. But basically, my role focuses on bridging the gap between science and society. And I think this is one of the least prioritized areas in the research enterprise. So really being able to help, scientists see the value of engaging and co-creating science with society, but at the same time being able to help society with mechanisms for which to actually engage with science, to build trust in science and scientists, to access science, to use science. So for now, I think I'll stop there. And I guess we can talk about more in the questions. I don't want to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to you, Huwaida, you mentioned about your work in oncology. We are so used to talking about clinical trials in malaria, HIV, our infectious diseases within Kenya. How ready is Kenya and the rest of the sub-Saharan countries in conducting clinical trials on non-communicable diseases?
Caroline is really waiting for this answer. I think that we certainly have a solid infrastructure. We do have the talent. I think this has been shared in our introductory remarks by Chris. And what we need, though, is that mindset shift, because the rest of the world views us with the same question, that we are experts in infectious diseases, but what about non-communicable diseases? And I think we need to have the mindset shift for ourselves that what we know in terms of how to do things correctly is readily transferable across different disease areas as well. So the infrastructure is there. We have a great regulatory framework that's really solid, that is at international level. We have our logistics and supply chain all ready. We actually do have the talent, right? It's just not, it's been underutilized, that's what I would say. So are we ready? We're definitely ready. I think we just need to be the ones to embrace it ourselves, first of all, and then advocate for the opportunities that are there that are unknown to people who are not here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. Nick, how do you think we can be able to actually strengthen some of these, what I may call limitations to what people think we can do in terms of clinical trials?
Just to, because it's a general question, but some of the things I think we need to strengthen is our regulatory framework, just to ensure that, like, for example, ethics committees and our ethics person is there to ensure that we fast track the review process. And if there are challenges with, for example, the ethics committees in terms of resourcing, you see how that one can be strengthened, such that we submit a protocol. It can be reviewed very, very fast. Because what happens, especially if you are conducting a multi-center, multi-country, competitive recruitment kind of a study, and you are being selected as an investigator, then your ethics committee takes time to approve your project. You see, the only money you can get, in terms of, because me, I'm a businessman, the only money we get is the startup cost. So the per patient cost, which you can get from recruitment, you lose that one. Another one is also advocating for people to accept that clinical trials are here to help people. They are not. We are not using people as guinea pigs. So a lot of communication is required, and I've seen, of course, some of our partners. They are very big in communication and trying to bring this one out. What we do with the patients, how the patients are benefiting, and also, of course, the access programs, like, for example, what DNDA they are doing. We need to go out there, advocate, communicate, have clear message, strengthen our regulatory system, medical systems, and also we are very happy now. We have very good logistics guys who are now in the logistics space, whereby we took a lot of time to clear things from the airport, to get permits, if storage and all that. And we have guys now who are doing that. So those are some of the things we are doing. So thank you.
Caroline, jumping to you. Nick has touched on a very talked about topic. We would have clinical trials coming in. Then they look at Kenya. We have everything, as Hueda has mentioned. We have the clinical trial sites. We have the experienced staff and everything. But then they look at the time that it would take us to get regulatory approval or to have ethics review. Then they're like, should we go to South Africa instead or to another country? What can we do to be able to ensure within the research landscape in Kenya and within the region also, because as we talk about multi-country clinical trials, that we can improve on such activities? What are guidelines in place?
Okay, as I speak now, we are 39 accredited ethics committees in Kenya. 39, we're almost 40. And that's a plus, but that's also a minus. And you find that also everybody now wants to review ethics. So we'll have the accredited committees, and then we have the ones at the county, and then you have one at the hospital, and so on and so forth. We are happy, we are glad, we have NACOSTI, and we are continuously talking with NACOSTI to try and see how we can centralize some of the functions of ethics committees so that not everybody has to review a clinical trial. And we can just pick a few or create a different body just to do clinical trials so it can go faster. Because what it is, ladies and gentlemen, is that the regulatory system is like a relay. So each one of us in our little corners are running as fast as we can, but when we hand over the baton, it slows down. And you know, it's the speed of the baton that you're interested in. And there's not much you can do about that. So we are 36 of us, 39 accredited committees, but we only have one PPB, and so we should, and there's only one committee at PPB. So I'm really hoping that this society, together with NACOSTI, we can change the model in our country. It will take a little bit of time because we are used to our little fiefdoms. We are very important people as you see us. And we like to be recognized for whom we are. So for us to let go of some of our power so that we can just acknowledge indeed that somebody else can review and it will be okay. So we have moved a bit. We do have reliance agreements where, like for example, KNH and KEMRI, we have a reliance agreement between the two of us so that we don't have to double review. But now we'd have to have 39 reliance agreements. So we do need help. We do need somebody to oversee this because we are busy trying to review as fast as we can. And if you think of our workloads, really like, for example, KNH, they can have up to 100 initial submissions in a month. And unless you're ChatGPT, surely, it's going to take a minute to do all that review and to make sure that you've handed it over to the next person. So we're looking into these things, and it took you 3 years, Chris, 2 years to set this up? Yeah, give us 3 years, phase one. We're at phase one. Yeah, we will get there because we have almost agreed. It's just to find out the logistics. What's the best way to do it? Mm-hmm.
And just to add, in terms of the region, EAC, are we looking at collaborative methods of reviewing clinical protocols? Because I'm thinking if I want to conduct a multi-country one, if you have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania within the EAC, and I put it as one proposal, are those some of the things that could be looked at?
I know we have the policies. They were written a long time ago. So there is an East African health section that we sat down and we wrote how we'd like proposals to be reviewed and how we'd like it to go. We have the policies, but then we need to maybe develop the trust. We need to, yes, I believe that's the word I'm looking for. We need to develop the trust and just agree that, yes, this proposal is going through 3 different countries. We are okay if UNCST does it. They just need to tell us what is going on, and we need to just mind what is happening in our own country. But you see, it takes time to build trust. So in terms of policies, I think we're there. But in terms of it actually happening, it will need people.
Thank you. And as we look at per patient costs and also increasing clinical trials within the countries, in terms of our patients, because we're dealing with patients in the end, we know the illiteracy rates in the regions that we're working with. How do we ensure that we are obtaining informed consent to participate in these clinical trials? How sure are we that we're doing right by our patients, even as we try to increase the clinical trials within our region? Maybe, Lillian, you could touch on some of the work on that.
Okay, so I think one issue we've come across is that when people talk about informed consent, they really focus on the clinic aspect, where you have a potential study participant in front of a clinician, and you're asking these questions and they're responding. But informed consent is a process that starts right in the community. When you go out to even begin recruiting, how are you empowering potential study participants to actually understand and be allowed the opportunity to ask the sometimes very unpleasant questions that you may not want to hear? And also be able to, at some point, challenge you. So that is what should consist in informed consent. Right from when people go into the communities to recruit, to the time they bring potential study participants into the clinic. During that particular process where a study participant is able to append their signature or verbally consent, through the clinic visits, when the study is ongoing, that still needs to happen. Because in most cases when participants are joining a study, the amount of information taken in sometimes is overwhelming to really comprehend in just one sitting. But how are we able to support them through the entire study conduct process to continuously keep reminding them about the reason they're participating, about the different study processes and procedures, and about what it means to them when results get released. So that should be through the entire research life cycle.
I really like that point you've made, because I know also working as a clinical trial physician, we concentrate on the paper. We just want the informed consent signed, and as fast as possible, so we can enroll as also as fast as possible. So I think we always need to put in mind the people that we're dealing with, not as subjects, as more of clinical trial participants that we need to actually involve them more. So coming back to you, Huwaida, of course, if we're talking specifically infectious diseases, most of the people that would be involved in, I could say lower socio-economic status. If you go into non-communicable diseases, are you dealing with the same kind of population? Are you having any difference in terms of seeking consent? And at the same time, how do you think we can be able to increase clinical trials in NCDs in Kenya?
That's a really interesting question. And I say it's interesting because I think at this point, it's very pervasive for any family in Kenya, whether it's low, middle, or high socioeconomic status, to have a diabetic in the house, to have somebody with hypertension, or to have somebody they're caring for with cancer. So that perception that it's infectious disease, it's low socioeconomic status, is not actually reality. And it's not reality even in our public hospital system as to the patients who are going to seek care. So that's the part which I think we need to reframe as to who our patients are, but also why it's really important not only to do research, but generally gather solid evidence so that we can actually get the true burden of disease. Because currently, I think there's a lot of underreporting of the full healthcare picture. So when it comes to now the consenting bit in the non-communicable disease space, I think what the ethics committees typically complain about when it comes to cancer research, which is where we, myself and my team, have worked most in terms of NCDs, is the length of the consent form. And I really like the response because it's the same approach that we have, that consenting is a process. It's not a one-time stop shop, sign here and go. One of the things that we have implemented, again, in consultation and collaboration with ethics committees, with the health authority, is a short form consent form. Also using translation and translators who understand the local context, right? And it's not so academic. These are the things that we're working on, but also understanding that consenting is a process, understanding the psychosocial impact for a patient at that point. By the time they're being approached to participate in a clinical trial, usually for non-communicable disease space, it's because first line, second line has not worked, something new needs to come on, or this is, the next best thing that's available to them in terms of their care cycle. And that whole support, and it really takes time. The consenting bit does take time. We're very cognizant of that. So it's not a situation of get enrolled, sign, and then you're getting treatment in the next 1 hour, And so that's why even when we take that into consideration in protocol design, the screening period is really a whole month. And things are broken up, not only to get the results and evaluate correctly if the patient meets the criteria for the study, but also to allow the patient, the time to really absorb what's happening, to have the time to ask the questions and move along the process. So just as infectious diseases are a lot more acute and the pace of that type of research is faster, Whereas non-communicable diseases are more insidious and have a longer curve, even the way the research goes is also fashioned in that way, because it is a heavy load for a patient, and we are very cognizant and take that into account, that we need to have the patient at the center of it. We need to carry the patient along. It's not just, this is the only option, take it or leave it.
Thank you. Caroline, we know we have quite a lot of sponsors, most of them international, we have industry. Are we setting our research agenda within the country, within the region? Do you think our local research institutions are actually leading the clinical trials that we are conducting, or we are implementing the clinical trials that are being brought to us?
I wish I could change my face. The research agenda in Kenya, research agenda in any country south of the Sahara. Well, I'm glad to say that we have a national research fund now that we can actually get what I would like to call Kenyan money to do Kenyan research. So that's awesome. But by and large, we still depend on the people who have the money. The people who have the money and who want to pay for the research. I would say by and large that's the case. But I would say also that it's changing a little bit. Having been around, many of the researchers I know are now very senior researchers, and they've been around for around 30 years now doing research. And when I talk to them, I feel that they push back a bit more. Right? And I think that's just as much as I can say. They push back a bit more, they question a little bit more, and I dare say sometimes they can even say, no, we're not interested. That's really excellent. And of course, people feel that you'll miss the boat, but they've come to that place where they realize we've done enough that doesn't necessarily really help us. So that's great. And then COVID has come, and COVID has shown that actually we should be doing a lot more research in the global south. And that's also going to assist for some of our research agenda to come through. But really, if I was to be asked what we should be researching on in Kenya, I'd probably say poverty and corruption. So you see. So somebody has to take the lead. If we were all to put in our ideas, everybody has their own priority. But I just like this notion that I feel that our senior researchers are getting a little bit better at saying, can we do a little bit something different, or can we change this a little bit? And that's been very helpful. And if that can continue, one day we'll probably have it as it should be, where before the proposal is written, you're actually all just sitting together saying, is this what we need to be doing in this country? Thank you. Oh, sorry, consent documents. 22-page consent documents. Yeah. So this is something that I found out just recently, that all the guidelines that talk about informed consent tell you that you need to have it, and they tell you the elements of informed consent. But nobody is stopping you in drawing pictures, honestly. You really don't have to have all of those words on the informed consent document. You can just have cartoons, pictures, because the idea is for somebody to understand it. Really, when you have a consent document that looks like a package insert that has been written in font 2, and it's so dense text, even somebody who has had more than 12 years of education will struggle to read it. So that's all I would ask for this group, and there are many people here for people who write the proposals, is that you can just change. There's no law against it. There's no guideline against it. You can just change it to make it a little bit easier to read.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's quite great to hear we are having quite a huge voice as researchers, even being able to say no to the kind of research that we want to do. Lillian, do our patients also have this kind of voice? You mentioned that within the informed consent process, we need to be able to allow them to be able to decide on this. But as we were having a previous discussion on this, most of the people that we deal with, either due to illiteracy or just lack of knowledge, we tend to wait to be advised on what to do. What efforts can we put into ensuring that we're also empowering our patients to be able to know that apart from saying no to this clinical trial, this research maybe is not applicable to me, or I do not see how I benefit from it?
So just to backtrack a bit, for me, I prefer to say both patients and, how can I term it, study participants. Because not everybody who takes part in research is actually with condition under study. And so when we talk about patients, then we are narrowing that gap and that opportunity for others to actually have a role in making a contribution to science. But going to what you're asking, one of the things that we've found is that researchers struggle to relinquish some level of authority, some level of power. And so when you tell them that who determines what research should be conducted in community X, in most cases they will struggle, because to them, they have thought about this, they assumed, probably rightly so, that this is a critical problem that needs addressing, and then they design their research questions. But then when you ask how do you know that at the end of the day, the community where you're going to carry this study out is actually going to be responsive, is actually going to consider this as an issue, as a priority for them? Many of them will actually struggle. So what we try to do is to build that capacity for them to understand that this should be a mutually beneficial relationship. That as you have research ideas, it is always a good practice to give an opportunity to the communities where you're going to conduct the study to just go and ask whether what you're thinking is actually what they are thinking, and if it's not what they are thinking, how do you help them to see your viewpoint, that it's actually valuable? And giving them that skill set really helps them to be able then to begin planning for this process before they actually conclude the design of a study protocol. Ideally, that's what should happen, that you're able to give opportunity to the groups where you're going to conduct your study to be able to have a say. It may not necessarily shift your research questions, but it should be able to enrich your research questions. It could also potentially give you a new lens and new questions that you did not potentially think about. And so for us, what we do is to try and help and support researchers to be able to see that as you bring research literacy to communities, communities are bringing social cultural competency to research, and that the two should be able to support each other in building research questions that are actually going to be really valuable to both. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. I think that's a very holistic approach that we should all be practicing, of course, as we set about any agenda, specifically in research. Nick, how can we make ourselves more competitive? What do you think CROs, other stakeholders, specifically in Kenya, can be able to do to make sure Kenya is a competitive destination for clinical trials?
Yep. So one of the things I think we need to do is to, one, have a very qualified and experienced workforce. Because for you to, of course, the GCP requires us to have qualified workforce. We also need to ensure our infrastructure for laboratories, clinics, they are properly set up, such that if someone is bringing up a study in Kenya, or you don't need to go through those machines agreements whereby you have to purchase some machines, or you have to hire some machines, for example, for ECGs, for clinics, or some specialist equipment, you have to ship them to the country. So if you can have those around, and then we have contractors, people can provide those machines as contracts to our sites, that can help big time, because there are some studies whereby you need specialized tests like chemistry, some immunological tests, whereby now you have to ship samples out of the country for analysis. If you can have that one analyzed around, then we'll be very competitive. So workforce, equipment and infrastructure, and also, of course, as we talked before, regulatory environment, making sure that we have support from the Ministry of Health, from the practitioners, also encouraging our own specialists, maybe obs-gyns, oncologists, to also be able to encourage their patients to participate in trials for new drugs and indications. So that holistic way of looking at it, it will make us very, very competitive. Another thing is also just looking at also the involvement of our communities, the community advisory boards. If also the communities can understand that science is here to help them, also is very critical. And this one happens if you also assure the communities that what you are doing is the right thing and is beneficial to them. And one of the things, of course, we assure that is from the sponsor perspective, is to have like the monitors. You know, I mean, telling them that we have some people who have an external oversight of what the processes which are ongoing, and they are reporting to the sponsor, and that sometimes they can check if some things are being missed by the investigators. Just giving that assurance to the communities and the people we work with, not only actually the laymen, the lay people who don't have good understanding of research, or people with high-grade kind of schooling, but also even the professionals. I know I have so many friends, we are almost the same level, but also they still don't trust research, including also even, I don't know whether sometimes even some very close friends of mine, they don't even know what I do. Yeah, because when you tell them about the clinical trials, they are like the guinea pigs. And that thing, especially during the COVID, and it was very big time, eh? So that's accelerated development of vaccines also brought a lot of public mistrust. So we need to build that. Yeah. So both the key article things like infrastructure, human resource, but also the social bit of things. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nick. A quick round, just a minute or less. How do you see the Clinical Research Society of Kenya contributing to the future of clinical trials in Kenya? To finish us off.
Can I go first?
Yes, please.
So what I see CRSK bringing in terms of value to the whole ecosystem is really getting to the root cause of what we have said is going to make our region, our country, more attractive for clinical trials. And it's bringing that talented workforce together. But more importantly, it's breaking down the silos, right? I think prior to this, and we've touched in this discussion upon how siloed we were, academia, you know, KEMRI was an entity on its own, untouchable, you know, industry was the devil, and we were all separate. But how we are working now, look at what we've achieved just in the last couple of years, actually, since the pandemic, because the pandemic pushed all the boundaries, right? We had to come together because it was really a life or death situation. But look at what transformed within our whole networks, within our whole way of working, and what we've managed to achieve. So what I see is that collective power of us. That's what I see the society bringing and breaking down those silos, allowing that communication and collaboration that is so critical to really propel us to the next level.
Yes, I agree. I think the society will help us cooperate better, you know. I often talk to people in ethics committees and I tell them, I came to realize they don't know the kind of deadlines that the pharmaceutical company and the PI has. And you know, in ethics world, you just say, why must we hurry? We must not hurry. We must just do this as we ought to do it. But I think that The society will help us see each other's point of view, see where the other one is coming from. So you might see our workload and we might see your deadlines. And we might understand what this competitive enrollment means, and we might understand better how we can work better to assist you all. So just like yesterday, somebody was telling me that she thinks that in Kenya we are over-researched, and I almost fell down. And it's because she had been in hospital and 4 different people came to ask her to be in a study. And she just thought that this is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sick. I'm trying to get better. And then, unfortunately, they sent very young people to come and ask, and she's not very young herself. So she said they sent children to come and annoy me in my hospital bed. So CRST, building capacity, because I think maybe those young ones were also not, they haven't really been trained well. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm really looking forward to you saying some things which we cannot say. When we are trying to get together as ethics committees, if I try to tell people, let's do it together, that we should just accept KEMRI's review, they'll tell me that I'm suffering from ethical imperialism. And I've been told so before. So it would be nice if it comes from somebody else. It's easier to accept something from somebody else. So I think, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
So for me, I think it's being able to have or to know how to balance between what I'm hearing in the room, the critical deadlines, but at the same time being really conscious of what that could mean for those who are less empowered and who are required to actually provide the service of rolling up their sleeves or participating in these studies in whatever format. So how are we able to strike that delicate balance? And for me, the role that I see for the society is being able to know when to be able to say, we know we have deadlines, but we also know that we would like to conduct research in as much ethical, what can I use? Being able to not be called out on you're rushing, but you're forgetting the critical components that contribute to carrying out a research ethically. How do we do that? I think the key is to now begin building capacity, starting with the players in the room. Many people do not understand this field of study. I've interacted with people who assume that when you go out and communicate about a study, you've actually engaged, which is not right. When you disseminate results, you've actually engaged, which is not right. And so being able to help the players in the field to understand what do we really mean when we talk about community and public engagement. And this is not just about people who participate in the study, but it's also about those significant others who have the capacity to influence, whether negatively or positively. So these could be family members, they could be neighbors, they could be people in the communities, they could be community leaders who will tell people to go and participate. So how are we able to have that holistic view of what it means to actually engage? Because ultimately, the issue we do research, we are not yet at the level of Elon Musk who can dream and say, I want to go to the moon, and he goes. We're doing research to benefit society. So if we're doing research to benefit society, then we need to be able to do research in a way that society will value science. So building that capacity for whoever is a player in the field to know what does it mean when we talk about community and public engagement. It's not telling people what to do. It's not telling them how science is critical so they need to participate. It is about being able to listen to what are their fears about science and how can we work to allay those fears and enable them to be able to see the value that science brings to society. So for me, in a nutshell, building that capacity.
I'm in agreement with everyone. So in addition to us being, all of us being experts in politics, as you know, politicians, when you want to go and see a politician, If you go alone, they will not take you seriously. But if you go with a group, they like groups. They like groups. So the same thing, our society actually would be a very good platform and also a way of reaching out to policy decision makers and also contributing to the policy. I mean, in terms of, for example, any policy which will affect patient recruitment, any policy which will affect hard to reach patients, participants, like for example, minority participants, people living in difficult to reach areas. If, for example, the Data Protection Act, which is around in Kenya now, collection of information from people from using different technologies, it will be easier for us to be able to say, okay, yes, of course the law says this, but we need also some leeway to be able to collect very hard data from very hard to reach populations without infringing on their rights. Another thing is the issues of networking. It's easier. Sometimes we get a lot of visibility questionnaires asking us for studies of very rare diseases. I mean, recently we had one, but we didn't know many people. Like today, of course, I met someone here who told me she's involved in, I think, in rare diseases. So that networking platform. Another one, of course, like for example, now GCP is being revised to revision 3. As a society, we can provide our inputs to that, which is very relevant to our setting, with the localized mindset, whereby we know our settings, and then we will be able to provide input to the GCP such that the next revision, it takes care of our situation. Because the initial GCP was very global and very developed markets. Another thing, of course, is, for example, the training of our investigators and also clinical researchers. As a society, because now we have a society, as subcommittees, we can come up with subcommittees whereby we can go through the curriculums and say, this is the minimum training needs for a study coordinator, a study nurse, an investigator, a monitor, a clinical research professional. Because we know, like for example, everybody will tell you need to be customer focused, not the patient focused, if you are at the site level. But if you have heard from the other panelists about the informed consent process, that's something now which needs to be instilled so much to the site staff, that consenting process is a all life cycle of a trial, from screening to procedures to the end of trial. So people need to be consented. They need to get that information about the study throughout. So this platform is critical, and I thank God today we have launched this society, and then of course we will push very hard. I mean, we support the whole secretariat. Of course, all of us, let us put a lot of effort to make sure we succeed as a team. And of course, as the Bible says in the book of Jeremiah 29:7, is that village I sent you, if it succeeds, you'll also succeed. Of course, I mean, you just read Jeremiah 29:7. Yeah. It talks about if the way where you are, if people succeed, you'll also succeed. Yeah. So this is a good society, and this let us use it as an advocacy platform, policy decisions platform, networking platform, and also capacity building platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can all agree those have been some powerful messages that have been passed along from the different stakeholders that participate in clinical research. I have a timekeeper who has been looking at me. Do I have permission to ask the audience for a few questions? I am being generous with the question asking. Do we have a few questions that would like to pose to our panel?
Thank you very much for a very good discussion. My name is Dr. Teresa Kinyari from the University of Nairobi. I have two questions, one for ethics and one to Huwaida. I think one about ethics is it's all a headache for PIs. Is it possible for you to have more reviewers? I know we have 39 ethical committees, and we have the usual, the required composition, but given the workload, I believe there's room to have more reviewers because we know that clinical trials cannot be fast-tracked, but maybe you can discuss that. I think to Hueda, I wanted to ask whether it's possible for the Clinical Research Society of Kenya to work with other professional organizations to harmonize clinical care. For example, when you think about cancer, we have KESHO, which basically works under hematology and oncology. But we know we have a lot of oncology care is not harmonized in this country, and that also has implications on the eligibility criteria for most of the patients that we have. So I don't know what your thoughts are with regard to that.
I'm happy I'm sitting next to Hueda. You can give her some Panadol. Since ethics committees are a headache. Yeah, well, the thing with ethical review committee members, and I've been one for many, many years, is that we are volunteers. In fact, there's a time we tried to take somebody off our committee because we felt that they were not really up to par. And she said, you can't remove me, I'm a volunteer. I volunteered to come off, and I will volunteer to get off, okay? So we try as hard as we can to make ethics review be more important to our reviewers. And there are things that we try to do as ethics committees. We try to go on retreats. We try to have team building. We try to have the Christmas party. We try a lot of things just so that amongst everything else they are doing, they would put us first. They would put us maybe on their first to-do list rather than when they've finished everything. But it's something which so far there's not much, what do you call it, I mean, being an ethical review committee member doesn't really take you very, very far. And we coerced ours. We just coerced them. And we said, if you don't become a member of our committee, then we'll not be reviewing your proposals. You see, it was coercion. And that's how come they came to join, because nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to do it. So many people feel it's a thankless job. So at KEMRI, we are 65 members. We have 3 committees, and still we are going too slowly for Hueda. So, yeah, so that's it. That's just generally it. And then the more experience an ethics committee member is, the less time they have. And the more time they have, the less experience they have. So we'll send you review questions, some comments, and you'll get annoyed at the kind of question you've been asked. And you say, clearly these people are just not trained to do anything. So yeah, there are a number of moving parts. But yes, we will try to be better.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you for your question, Dr. Kinyari. And so I've been saying recently that I'm going to start handing out running shoes, track shoes. So my message would be, everybody needs to hit the ground running. That's going to be my slogan. But to your question, this is why I said it's really critical to actually have the society, to bring down those silos. And that's a really good way, through your question as you've demonstrated, and just also the responses that have been shared by Caroline for consent form, by Lillian for patient engagement, because that's what we need to actually understand what is of value. We're not doing research just to be doing research. All those numbers that you see written there, we're not doing research to publish papers, right? There needs to be a transformative mindset. We're doing research to get knowledge. What is that knowledge going to impact? It's going to change how we all are doing what we're doing. And that needs to be a collective agreement. I'm going to give now your question from a sponsor perspective, right? Yes, it's absolutely critical to engage for oncology an organization like KESHO to understand how a global protocol, right, either fits or does not fit for our context. Absolutely. And we are undertaking that. For patient consent forms, we have the short form one. Thanks for the suggestion for putting drawings. My colleague is here, Faith, who has been working on a patient video as well. So for the consent form, other than being taken through, there's actually a video in Kiswahili and hopefully in other local languages as well. But we're also listening and getting the feedback, right? So that communication of what is going to make a difference is why the society is so important. Beyond ourselves as clinical research professionals, how are we engaging to make sure that what we are doing has an impact, right? So when it comes to patient engagement, we had a multiple sclerosis study. Before we brought the study, we engaged MS Society of Kenya, and we were quite surprised as to what would make a difference for the patients. It's not what we had thought from a science, a medication point of view. It was how they get up in the morning and what time we would be scheduling clinic visits. We can't have clinic visits at 8 in the morning. They're not moving at that time. They need somebody to go with them. When we're designing our study budget, we have to build in then transportation for the caregiver, meal for the caregiver. These were important insights, so fully agree with you on that. And the same thing as well with Kesho, we have started doing that. As I mentioned, because we have now majority of our studies in oncology, one of the biggest things we've had as feedback is most global protocols exclude people with HIV from participating in global trials. So what we've had a discussion in-house, it's been a very robust one as to we have many, many people living with HIV, with well-controlled, viral loads undetected. Why can't they, right, also benefit from participation in global trials? It's actually discriminatory to exclude them. So these are some of the changes we are having. We have received feedback as well from Kesho saying that our exclusion criteria in terms of what is standard of care is not standard of care here. We need to really think through those things. So absolutely, but this is why the society is critical. It's allowing for that flow of communication. It's allowing for that conversation as to what's important for you, but understand what's important for me as well. So where do we get the middle point where we are serving our patients correctly and driving our healthcare system? Tomorrow, we're the ones who are going to be the patients, really. We need this system to work. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, one for Lillian and the other one for Caroline Stroke, PPB. So for Lillian, how well or appropriately can we engage the public or the community, because we have we have trials whereby we have dropouts or possible participants who decline consent, and we need participants so that we can achieve the trial milestones, because we don't have participants, UHAIDA will be on our neck. Yeah, and the second question to PPB or the regulatory is, I've been wondering about routine inspections. After you've approved a trial or the protocol, do you go to the site where, kwa ground, where things are happening and see how well is the trial being implemented? Are we taking care of the participant safety and well-being? Yeah, that has been a question.
I think there's another question there. We'll take that first, and then so that we can finish off with answers.
Hi, everyone. Christine is my name. I represent a patient advocacy group for rare diseases. My question or observation is that, and I also sit in one of the 39 ERCs. One of my comment or question is, can the CRSK engage patients at an earlier stage rather than when it comes to us consenting or assenting for our kids, so that at least we get, I'm trying not to use the word buy-in, but for the community to feel like part of the participation or part of the process Thank you.
Koigi, for you, one last question. Is there a microphone?
Hi, everyone. Allow me to stand. Dr. Paul Koigi is my name, Head of Research at Nairobi Hospital. I want to make a proposition. I think Caroline has made a very important statement. We have 39 committees. They are doing something, but they are still legitimately overwhelmed, and there's a need for capacity building specifically to address the unique needs that trials put on the table. Is it possible? Would it be favorable for our overall regulator to consider developing a team that will specifically address the needs of clinical trials that can come from the CRSK? Yes.
Yeah. No? You can. Okay. No.
Excuse me. Please, can I add to his question, please?
Yes.
I know where he was going. Sorry, my name is Dr. Lulu Oguda. I'm the PI for the RSV clinical trials here in Kenya. I want to add to his question, not just an IRB looking at clinical research, but there's one thing that I did not hear mentioned at all in this room, licensure clinical trials. So if you have that IRB for licensure clinical trials sitting here, where you have people, you have industry, you have academia, you have the clinical research teams, you have data people, everybody, I think you're going to get a really robust IRB that can be an example to the others, so that we don't have all these delays. Thank you.
Definitely. Who would like to start? Yes, Lillian.
Let me start. I hope I'll remember the questions that have been posed. Let me start with the easier one. In terms of engaging patients and participants early, I think that is what we would call in our practice the gold standard. You need to start early. And this should be, in our view, when you're still developing or designing your protocol. Because in most cases, what happens is you've designed the protocol, you finish it, then you come and engage, sorry to say this, community advisory boards. Not that I have anything against them, but we've always had issues around, issues around legitimacy. Who gives you that authority to speak on my behalf, and how do you, provide a feedback loop? So there are issues there, but basically what I'm trying to say is you need to start as early as possible at protocol development process. And this should not just be with the people who you're targeting as potential participants. Like I said, there are other players within the community that are potentially going to either positively or negatively influence your study, and so they need as well to be brought on board very early on. In terms of the question you asked, I hope I remember. Engagement is a continuum. And in most cases, what I like to say is that there is what we call the must-do engagement. And this is where you have ethical obligation. When you say you're going to recruit, how are you planning for informed consent? How are you providing accurate information, comprehensive enough? Are you giving participants opportunity to actually go back and consult and make a decision? So that is the must-to-do of engagement. And then we have what we call the smart-to-do engagement. Smart-to-do is where you're able to actually reach out to people and be able to build capacity for them to do work differently. This is where you have CROs and different players in the research ecosystem. You empower them to be able to do better. And then there is the wise to do, where you really know you may not necessarily reap benefits immediately, but it has long-term positive implications. And this is where we talk about aspects of building trust broadly in society and being able to inspire even others to want to participate in the science enterprise. So when you look at engagement in those phases or using that model, then it helps you be able to know how are you going to be doing what with who and at what intensity levels, because it's all also dictated by the money. So I will stop there for now, but happy to talk over dinner or later.
Yeah, before we jump into Caroline's ethics question, just around the patient support groups, and thanks so much for your question. I'll speak from an industry side. We are definitely very interested. I think there's just a lack of awareness of where the patient support groups are. Who are they? We just completed feasibility in 5 of our sub-Saharan African countries last month. And this was about 12 sites out in those 5 countries. There was a question in the feasibility as to whether the institution or the PI, anybody in the team engages a patient support group. And I spoke to every investigator out of those sites, and only one responded yes, and even knew. All the others who are key opinion leaders for that disease area didn't even know whether there was a patient support group or not. So we sort of stumble across patient support groups. And this is something that definitely from the society's point of view, I think we'll take as well in-house. This is where it's going to help for us to map who are the people on the ground that we need to engage with, right? So in the West, it's very typical to engage patient support groups at the time of designing the protocol. And many times our global teams are asking us, is there a consideration that we should? So I mentioned the multiple sclerosis one. That's because we had already worked as Roche with MS Society of Kenya for World MS Day. So we had already known who to go to ask the question before we brought the study in. But for other disease areas, actually it's, for this study that I mentioned that we were doing, at the end, because all the investigators were saying no, or they're not aware, so we were asking them, is it that you're not involved with a patient support group or you're not aware of any patient support group, right? Because those are 2 different questions. And most of them were saying they're not aware. And we were sitting there and actually Googling, So I think that would be a really something of service, and to move, as I've been saying, patient support groups into advocacy groups for patients. And that's part of the advocacy of actually having the patient voice in the research so that the data that comes out is actually research that's beneficial.
Okay, there was a question about whether we go out into the field to monitor what researchers are doing. Yes, we do. But by the time I come into the field to see what you're doing, then I'm at the place where you've been doing it badly for a very long time. I mean, sometimes even serious adverse events. We get a serious adverse event because a research assistant is the one who was given the injection. Can you imagine that? It was the research assistant giving the injection, and they were supposed to do IM, and they did something between IM, SC, and intravenous, and everything else. And so there's a problem. Now, by the time I come and I find that out, it's been happening for a while. So we have to go upstream, and I hope that CRST will help us with that, because it's difficult to keep training study personnel. We do want the PIs to do it, but as I said, PIs are also very busy, so they can be in charge of more than 3 clinical trials. And that's just the way the world is right now. So the people who have made a name are the ones who get the clinical trials. In the end, they end up having too many, and in the end, they can't provide proper oversight. So we all have to work together here to see if we can increase training of people in the field, and also research integrity is another thing that we need to talk about a little bit more. Whistleblowers are always very helpful, yes, but then, that's not a very easy thing to do. Right, now to go to, Caroline said a very important thing. CRST and getting an ethics committee that is actually just dealing with clinical trials. So let's just say, for the sake of mathematics, we have 40 ethics committees just so that we can calculate quickly, and they have at least 20 people in each. Those are 800. 800 reviewers, and those many. Now what happens is that across the 800 viewers, some have one proposal in 6 months, and some have 100 proposals in 1 day, in 1 month. So I think a good place to start is to see whether, one, we can first of all train all ethics committees to a certain level so that perhaps they can help with the people. The ones who have like 100 proposals, they're not 100 clinical trials. They're usually student proposals. So can we find a way of spreading it out so that the younger ethics committees can start wetting their feet by reviewing student proposals as we try and get now the ones that are a bit more experienced to now just be dealing with the clinical trials? Because at the end of the day, if we just decide to choose 5 ethics committees to do this, then you demoralize the country. Other people just feel, oh, okay, they are the chosen few, yeah, who can only review, and the rest of us are just, by the way. I've been mulling about this, and I'll continue talking with Chris and anybody who would listen, just to see how we can spread the work. Because actually, when you think about 800 reviewers, we don't really have that much work. The way somebody told me, the devil is not really that busy. Some of the things is that we help him. We help him with our own problems. We are the ones who do it. But to get us to agree to that, yeah, that's where the work is going to be. But we have a lot of social capital in this room. I bet you, if we were to put our heads together, we'll crack this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for our panelists. So I think I'm seeing Moses pointing. Yes, definitely licensure was not addressed. But I also heard you mention, is there any NACOSTI representative?
There is no NACOSTI representative, and I shall not represent them. They are my bosses, so I can't do that. But I have to confess, I'm not so sure what that means. I don't know what licensure. I didn't. Yes, you can explain to us.
I'll introduce myself again, Dr. Lulu, medical doctor by training, clinical researcher, long background doing clinical trials for the FDA, EMEA. When I'm talking about a licensure clinical trial, I'm talking about a clinical trial that is going to lead to your product, whatever product Sanofi or Roche gives me to do the phase 1 to phase 3 clinical trials, that is going to lead to that product, my data being added into whatever other multi-center trial data they have, that will be sent to the FDA or to the EMEA. We don't have an equivalent of that in Kenya. That's going to give them the license. They'll approve that product, and it will give them the license to market that product to the general population. When somebody, one of the panelists asked about whether our agenda, our research agenda is Kenya-driven or sponsor-driven, I was expecting that answer, actually. It comes from the sponsor most of the time, because please remember, they're very, should I say altruistic, humanitarian during the COVID-19 era, but they're in business, face it. And we have to purchase those products to pay back for the clinical trials, which are extremely expensive to conduct. By the time it goes to the FDA, there's a whole process it goes through. Sometimes it takes even 7 years for one drug to be approved. For a vaccine, you could find the vaccine started being worked on in 1971. Until today, it's not yet been approved. So that's what I'm asking. Because I have put clinical protocols through IRBs, and the questions I get, I ask myself, do they understand what I'm really, truly asking? So I have to go back to the US FDA, bring the FDA approval, and then it's approved locally, which means there's a huge gap for capacity building. Because once you have FDA approval, they assume it's fine. But the FDA is looking after their own interests, the American population. Who's taking care of this population? Do you understand?
I can start on that. That's a discussion we've actually been having quite a lot at DNDi. We work specifically on neglected tropical diseases. So we do most of our trials in the global south, but considering that we want these drugs registered, and of course in the WHO essential medicine list, we have to go through the whole FDA submission or EMA. And the question has been, the people using the drugs are not based there. The countries that are going to register these drugs are not based there. But it goes back to our regulatory framework. We keep on saying it's good. We are working on it, but definitely there's been the discussion with the African Medicines Agency and having a more robust regulatory framework that would allow us to have licensure within our region that is adequate. Because, of course, even as any other sponsor or pharmaceutical is putting their money, or for us donors, putting their money in a clinical trial, working towards registration of a drug, we need to be sure that it is meeting all the regulatory requirements. That is why we go to the FDA. That is why we go to the EMA. For us to have our own AMA or having our own local, we need to be able to ensure that it is as stringent, so that we do not seem that we are working with a specific population and going through a particular regulatory authority because it's easier, or that it has less stringent measures for us to be able to get our product much faster out there. So I think it goes back to us. Of course, not CRSK. We are CRSK, as mentioned. It's not a particular group, it's us. How we can be able to work towards that in ensuring our regulatory framework is bigger than Kenya, bigger than East Africa, more regional. And we already have quite a lot of organizations. WHO, AVRF, have been very influential with our regulatory and ethics committees. We have AMA. Hopefully that would be a much bigger and better way to be able to look at it. Because right now I'm working on a clinical trial for a drug that is specifically being used in Sudan. But I have to work towards FDA submission. Does not make quite a lot of sense. Yes, so that is definitely a huge factor that we need to look into as we grow. Anything else to add? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Borna. Just to add to that, and thanks for clarifying the licensure. So we call them registration trials. So that's for marketing registration. I'll speak from the organization that I work for because I can't speak for others and how they approach things. We cannot do clinical trials for a product that will, one, not come into market, or that has not been deemed to be a need for the local healthcare system. I have to say, though, our regulator has been asking questions in that, how is this benefiting a Kenyan patient? We regularly get that question. So it has to be very clear, even if it is a trial for a product that's still in development and going for, the data is going to go for licensure, registration, we still have to demonstrate why are we including Kenya in this. I believe for the West African countries, this is actually becoming a requirement for marketing authorization to have local data. So similar to what China and India are doing now, because China pushed that, they're not going to register any drug if a trial was actually not present with local Chinese data to demonstrate how it's, and we do have African countries that are doing that. And as Borna mentioned, this is where the African Medicines Agency, and we have a special envoy from AU coming in. We're talking around the regulatory framework for that licensure bit. It's very early days, of course, but on a local level as well, even if it is for a product that has been marketed elsewhere, when we are doing a clinical trial here, Pharmacy and Poisons Board is asking us, why is this relevant to the Kenyan population? We are getting those questions. So just if that adds an element of context as to, you know, how it's happening at what level. So, yeah.
I think I'll have to stop here, though I'm seeing a question to add on to that. Yes. The last one, we are still here.
So mine isn't a question. I just wanted to add to what Hueda said. My name is Neko Etsula. I work at Novartis. I work in global health. By definition, and I work specifically in malaria, by definition, we're going to register our products here. As a researcher, I've worked on the RTSS, registered. I've worked on IV artesunate, registered. Coatem baby, registered. So we don't do random trials, we do for registration. The second thing is sometimes we have additional evidence requirements for guideline inclusion. And that's really totally what drives our studies. The third piece is, as the experts in the room, we might develop a drug and you're like, we want to see how it works in preterm babies. We don't have the ability, you have the expertise. So we then rely on you to do that kind of a study. So everything is to support an evidence base for broader inclusion. I hope that clarifies.
As mentioned, we still have dinner. I'm sure with drinks, the conversations will flow even better. So right now, I'm going to give the mic back to Gilbert, who would continue. But another round of applause for the panelists. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was absorbing. And the conversation had just started. I mean, that's the first meeting, and you can see the ideas, the flow of thought, and the clarity of where we want to go. So I'm really excited. Very thought-provoking discussion and ideas which we'll keep on digesting over time. And I think when we meet again next time, one thing that I've learned and why we have this platform is because we have been working in silos. But now we have this vehicle, this baby. This baby will lead us to where we want to go, where we want to be in clinical research. Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge the presence of SACRA. As you mentioned that we did learn a lot. We got a lot of insights, guidance from SACRA. SACRA is represented by Leonard Lazarus. Leonard is from SACRA. If you could wave, or people can hear your voice.
Thank you, Gilbert. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. This is history in the making for every one of you in the room. I've been involved with SACRA from its birth, 2008. Been sitting on the EXCO since 2014, and unfortunately I can't get out at the moment, but hopefully one day. But it's been interesting conversations, and this platform that CRC has created is for every single one of you in the room to take research to its next level, to engage, to participate, to actually build capacity. And it's just not for clinicians or pharma, it's for every single person involved in that supply chain. So it's a great initiative from SACRA's side. We're really proud of this. We wanted to see this happen, and it's growth for you. Thank you. And we'll support you in every single way you want.
Thank you very much. Next, I'll invite Rob. You had his dinner, and you are sitting here because of the generosity of Rob and Co. So Rob, here is your 5 minutes of fame.
It's been reduced. We can smell the food. Thanks very much, Gilbert. Just an extra 50 seconds for Len. He's also Rodon Global. It's our partner in logistics. And he shipped all our banners up here free of charge, didn't you? No, thank you, Len. If you don't know Oxamir, there's a big signboard at the back there, but I won't go into detail. I've got 5 minutes. It has been a journey for us as well. As you can see, as you can hear, I'm not a Kenyan. Would love to be one. My wife was born here, so it's awesome to be back. My journey, much the same as Clinical Research Society as well. It's always been milestones for all of us. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got a mission. I've got a vision as well. So I wanted to come in and start a warehouse to store clinical trial material and send it to the far ends of the world. It's a big one. So, but if you have to have a vision, you have to have a mission, and you have to have your goal with you as well. And that's exactly what Clinical Research Society of Keene is all about as well. They have got that in place, and to bring everyone together. I was here in 2021 signing the lease for the empty godown. It's in Limuru, in the Tilisi Office Park, much the same as Tartu City. And I was here on a Thursday, signed the lease 5 years and 2 months. Not too sure why the extra 2 months. I'll get around that sometime. And my wife phoned me and she said, "Babes, Mr. Ramaphosa is going to close the borders. Get back." I can't. I've signed the lease. So I hurried back. It was on a Thursday, packed the car, and we popped a wheelie on the Sunday morning, 4 o'clock, and hoofed it up here. True to fame, on that Sunday evening, he closed all the borders, the provincial borders. We made it up, I think, 5 or 6 days, went through Botswana, big stories there, obviously COVID, negative certificate, valid only for 72 hours. So I've got 72 hours. We went into, I think, Lusaka, got our next negative test, plotted the map, and buses and trucks and all. So, babes, another road. There has to be a blue line on the Google map, not the red line, orange line, a blue line. Not a problem, on the blue line. Beautiful countryside, and then it stopped. Soft sand for 500 kilometers, 50 kilometers an hour, 30 kilometers an hour, 20 kilometers an hour. My COVID vaccine certificate was running out. My goal changed. My goal was to get to Nairobi before it expired. We made it. We just made it. And what a welcome sight. My wife said, "I'm from Kenya. They're friendly. They are wonderful people. They're party animals. Please." And as we're driving into Nairobi, I said, "Wow, look there's a happy bus. They're having a party on the bus." No, that's a matatu. I said, "Look at these guys on the motorbikes, red lights, etc. They are logistics experts. They're running all over the bloody show." I said, "No." I said, "Borders, be careful of the buggers." And then the police guy, wow, he was waving at me. And I said, "We waved back." And I said, he was following me. And I said, "No." We learned that he's slow down and stop, very carefully. We started building our warehouse. It took us 100 days. But first of all, when we arrived, I had met in 2017 two gentlemen, Jacob Jacob Adiko Apollo. Some of you might know him, and a person you might not know is a certain Dr. Gutu. Spoke to them and I said, "Listen, this is what I want to do, much the same. I'm on a mission, I'm on a vision, I want to conquer the world." And I spent about a half an hour explaining to the gentleman exactly what I want to do. And true to fame, Dr. Gutu allowed me to speak, a gentleman. And at the end, he said, "Rob, you have to walk before you can run." He looked me deep in the eyes. "I will walk with you." And wow, he introduced me to the regulatory authorities, all the institutions at a very high level, because you have to get, as he said to me, you have to get their buy-in as the elders of the clinical community before they will allow a business like this and sanction a business and get their blessing. That took me a little while, obviously. And he took a whole week off from his busy time at Camry. Amazing man. And with Jacob, the two of us went around and we visited many of you people here, explaining exactly what we wanted to do. And it was a whole year, up and down. 2 weeks a month, I was up and down, making sure we had things perfect for my staff in particular, and how they can run it. I reported back to him. I'm sorry, it's going to take but 7 minutes. To Dr. Ogutu, and he said, right, now Rob, aprons. The apron's off. Go for it. Then I started traveling overseas. Important for us because I have to market my company. I have to make up the money. It's a lot of money to set up a thing like this. I was in Croatia. I've traveled in a lot of on Europe, promoting and flying the Kenya flag. I was in Croatia, in Dubrovnik, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, oh, my name is, I think it's Mykola Pushakar. My name is Mykola Pushakar. I'm from Croatia. Where are you from? I said, I was nervous like I am now. I'm Rob. I'm an African. It confused him. And the next thing I went through to is, and that is where Caroline, very important and really the crux of the story, and must have heard it the last time now as well. I was in Orlando, Florida. I had two one-hour sessions together with 432 delegates, and there were 40 pharmaceutical companies. My 2 one-hour sessions, I had 30 of the pharmaceutical companies coming to listen to me. My mandate, they gave me my subject line, Nick, was, tell me the challenges you face in MENA regions, the Middle East and Middle East and North Africa. I've never been there. And I don't, as an entrepreneur, how do you speak about challenges? I speak about overcoming challenges. And that's what and that is exactly what the CRSK is all about as well. It's that mentorship that we have with Dr. Ogutu and Apollo. It's collaborating. It is embracing knowledge sharing as well. But I changed the subject heading is overcoming the challenges of the supply chain in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not talking about me, I had a sellout. It was full, the guys came back the next session as well. And one important point that came out of that, and now these guys are vice presidents, it's in America, and it's all the guys who've got the money, is a vice president of a pharmaceutical company, pulled me aside, and my name's Rob, and he said, Rob, like typical American drawl, and he said, Rob, I would love to bring more clinical trials into East Africa. But I've been told, and there's no offenses, by my CRO, that is my approved vendor because I've been an international company, that it takes more than 9 months to maybe 2 years for ethics approval to take place for a vaccine study. Yeah. That is why I am hesitant to even try. They've got vaccines for Ebola, SARS, MERS, and 70% efficacy for malaria. I phoned a friend and said, Dr. Ogutu, what's up, Doc? Oh, what's up, Doc? There you are. Put NDAs in place, etc. They are listening to Dr. I apologize for mentioning his name all the time, but he's my counsel, my medical advisor, and he is advising us. We're going to the next stage of discussions to see how best we can approach PPB, Ethics Committee, ROBs, etc., to attract these companies, because I'm out there flying the flag. That is me. I have to do it. It's my passion. But as you said, back at grassroots level, we are getting it in place. I mean, we heard it now. It's an amazing journey that you guys have done. So with the society, I can bring those pharmaceutical companies in that are wanting to do more work in Africa and more work in East Africa, and network through the society, because Africa is the powerhouse for clinical trials. Can I get an amen? Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I mean, the food is getting cold, so I'm conscious of that. So you have heard about Auxilia, so it's the time to see the Auxilia. Auxilia, there you go.
Thank you, Gilbert. So guys, I know we're past time. I promise there's food outside. We're not lying, there's food outside. And it won't take long. Like, yeah, I'm also nervous, so it won't take long. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Auxilia Mutemi, and I'm a clinical research associate. But academically, my background was in pharmaceutical science, which is not very common like in Kenya. And I found a very, very hard time trying to see where I can fit in, because I'm not a pharmacist, I'm not a pharmaceutical technologist. I'm supposed to be in drug discovery and development. We don't do much of that here. So I was very confused. I reached out to a lot of people, and I was told, where did you do your degree? I go back, do PhD, and then stay there. I kid you not, that is literally what I'd been told. And I was working on my PhD applications and stuff. I was reaching out, got a chance internship at IQVIA, met Chris. Chris sold me a very nice dream. Clinical research in Kenya is growing, and And it is, like, in the past 3 years, I can see like how it's really, really expanded and grown, and I'm really, really excited to be part of this. And my personal motivation for setting up the society is so that others like me, both students and early career researchers, who may not have found their spot in other research spaces, just like me, may be exposed to and made aware of this industry, because it's very closed. You only know from someone else who's doing it. It's very, very hard for you to know. Like, I think even when I applied, I didn't apply for internship, I applied for senior CRA. I didn't even know what it was. I had zero experience. When they reached out, I was like, are you sure? Did you see my CV? So it's a very, very close space. But I'm really lucky to have had amazing mentors. I met people who are willing to teach me, to walk with me, and here I am, 3 years later. And speaking of mentorship and guidance, tonight we've had the privilege of engaging with a very knowledgeable and experienced panelists. They did an amazing job of talking about what we can do for the future of clinical research in Kenya. And it's very, very exciting, especially to have everybody represented in the industry ecosystem, from pharma trial sites, CROs, regulatory, patient advocacy groups, who we often forget about, and our logistical partners and vendors as well. So CRSK is here, and it's for all of you. You guys are our target membership. Okay, and so I just have a couple of people that we'd like to thank tonight. So again, starting with our speakers, thank you, Dr. Huweda, thank you, Nick, thank you, Caroline, thank you, Lillian, and thank you, Dr. Bona, for making the time and honoring us with your presence. We know you're all very busy getting knowledge and giving knowledge, but thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. We also thank our sponsors, Oximio and Rodon Global, for sponsoring this event. And for our website, we thank Nuvotech for providing such great support. We also thank Makio Hotel. The staff have been amazing for hosting us, and our media team today from Adasha Limited. We also thank you, our members, both who are here with us and those that are attending remotely, for the amazing support you have shown CRSK from our first post on LinkedIn about a month ago. Thank you so much. And I'd also just like to acknowledge again our initial stakeholders, who I call our dream team, some of whom are here with us, like Innocent Abayo, Dr. Joseph Kabogo, Irene Amolo, Moses Waweru, Stacy Gondi, Nick Kisangasa, Naomi Gitao, Kevin Ocheng, Angeline Mwenda, and those who are who are not available today, like Gabriel Omwalo, Bernadette Kimotho, Devlin Nyakundi, Sophia Masila, Tina Muthui, and Johnston Thitiri. It really, really, really took a village to get us here. And lastly, for our secretariat, thank you, Rose. Rose, please stand up. So this is Rose. I know you've seen her in the emails and in membership and everything. So she's our everything right now, our admin on Pro Bono. So please look for her. She's very, very enthusiastic, and we're glad to have her in our team. And for Chris and Gilbert, please stand. So officially, these are my partners in crime. Thank you so much for listening to an intern all those years ago. And so, yeah, we finally did it, guys. Cheers to all of us as we march forward with CRSK, and especially to you, our attendees, both here and online. As we break for dinner, we hope that you network, get to know each other as CRSK members. Please pay your membership, please register. Like, as in, yeah, like we're serious about that. Mapema and your best. And then please follow if you've not already, please like, comment, share, follow our LinkedIn page. That's Clinical Research Society of Kenya. Please register on our website. That's www.crs-kenya.org. And yeah, we look forward to this. This society is for the clinical research people, and it's by the clinical research people. And we're all invited on this journey. So now I'll invite all of us to rise.
Okay, now we came for the launch, so we need to launch the society. I see there's something to the extreme left. I don't know how it works, but just watch out. So it's not a cannon gun, but some. Oh, okay. Okay, everybody, if you can look behind me, the banner, okay.
Sorry, Gilbert. Right, obviously it's Oxymer, that's it. No, it's not. So that's a bit about of what we do. We have a warehouse, it's a bonded warehouse, and we distribute all over sub-Saharan Africa. And from now on, I don't know, are you guys ready with the machine? Is he there? Okay, right. And do we say a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Hey, this is an exciting time. This is exciting. Hey, wow. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woohoo!
Okay, there goes the society. So the baby has been born and is ready to be nurtured, to grow and to be nurtured. So you may take your seats, and then the next step, the food is ready, it's getting cold. So please make your way to your right, there's food, and then we can continue the interactions. But thank you so much, it's been a pleasure, and let's continue the interactions.